Good morning, Boroda, Privyet, Bonadimiatsa. Hope you are all well. Week 2 of our distance learning plan. We're all following the news. We're all seeing what's happening in society. We're all getting used to our new normal. We're all into the mindset of the school is open, only the campus is closed. Today, for our gymnasium assembly, I want to talk about the concept of home and explore, especially as most of us are stuck inside our homes at the moment because of the lockdown, what this kind of idea of home means as we go forward. Before we do this, I want to share with you at the start of this assembly some news. And I think in the awfulness of this crisis, we at Heritage International School as a community should be really proud of what we've been able to change in the last few weeks. And I'll let you into a secret that when we first devised this plan and went to go ahead with it at the beginning of this crisis, this had never been done before in the way that we were proposing in Moldova. And we have worked very closely with the ministry. As you're probably aware, we had the minister and the state secretary here. We've had all sorts of officials here. We've trained about 12,000 teachers across Moldova, 250 schools across Europe, in what we're doing here. So there are some silver linings, shall we say, in the clouds of where we are at the moment. And one of them is how we've transformed. And I don't think education will perhaps be the same again after this crisis in the way that we've moved into sort of the 21st century learning methods. And the government, the ministry announced the changes that would benefit every school and every child in this country to actually have meaningful distance learning, not just work that's set on a platform with no interaction, but actually to allow the types of learning that you guys have been now having for nearly 2 weeks now. Talking of which, the key messages for week 2 of distance learning plan, I want to share this with you, and it's obviously in the presentation and it will be in the bulletin on Friday. But as we're getting used to how this works, and I've been dropping into classrooms now daily since this started, we've been looking at the ways that remote learning is going to work for everybody. And as you know, the first principle was to treat this as if it was the normal classroom. So I see everybody at 8:30. I see the classes start up on Google Hangouts. Attendance is being registered. We finish at 3:10. We are talking about some clubs potentially, but not just right now. Let's get these couple of weeks out of the way. But we treat this as classroom learning. And I imagine at home you have a place set out where you can work. I know for my own children back in the UK, that's what happens with them. And I've seen it in your homes as we've sort of got used to this new normal. The classroom language is really important, how we're working together. And what we would do in our classroom is exactly the same as we would do in remote learning. We're very conscious of the screen breaks that are needed because of the amount of time that people are online right now. And I know that we've said to parents in the bulletin, and I will say this to you now, when you have breaks, don't go and jump straight onto your phones or don't go straight onto screens. These are the moments where you need to kind of come away, go for a walk around the home, go into the garden. You can do something different than be permanently on screen. Video learning in an open space at home, I think that's a really important idea, so that people can see you. Some people do it in the living room, some people do it in studies. Obviously, the platform that we're using is Google, the Google Classroom Suite. We've made this very clear why we're using this. We are aware there are others. We opted to use this as a school, and so we could have control over what was going on, and we could make sure that it was internal for us as a school. So that's the platform we're using. Our teachers have been really firm with you, and I think you saw in the bulletin last Friday the rules and the guidelines we would expect from you in this. Now, number 7, dress in school uniform. This is obviously from sort of general recommendations. Certainly, we don't expect people in PJs. We don't expect people to be lounging around in bed. There's some wonderful tips. I saw Miss Linda's class. They're wearing some amazing hats. Some of the lower school children prefer to put their polo shirts on. It's just part of those routines. It's all part of getting into those routines. to get our mindset and our mentality into school. Don't share passwords or other sensitive information, well, you know that anyway. Do not use the school platforms to discuss personal matters. I am concerned. I've seen this with some groups where this is happening, and believe me, Mrs. Linda is on to this. The final one is to look after our mental health and our well-being in all of this. None of us knows quite how long this is going to last. We're starting to see some signs from China, from South Korea, from Japan, of where they've slowed the virus down. But we know that Europe is now in the epicenter of all of this, and we're watching this unfold in Italy, in the UK, in France, and Spain. I saw this from an international school. It's been used by quite a few international schools right now, and it is part of key messages. And part of this new normal is trying to get used to these new routines and trying to get used to what we can control and what we cannot control. And I thought in the era of social distancing, which is really difficult, especially as we've come from, the before time a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, of being able just to interact normally and our 24/7 societies. And I thought this was a really interesting way of looking at what we can't control and what we can. So we can't control the amount of toilet paper at the local store. We can't control how long this will last. We can't control how other people will react or other people's motives. We can't predict what's going to happen or the actions of others. We can't predict if others will follow the rules of social distancing. If you're following the situation in the UK, my own country, it's quite shocking. There's a lot of ambiguity around the messages there about social distancing, and people in parks and in crowded areas. I noticed the tube this morning from photos in London was absolutely crowded with people. So in terms of what we can control and what you need to focus on, so focus on your positive attitude. I'm actually going to say turn off the news. I'm going to make sure that my assemblies don't follow constantly the immediacy of where we are in this crisis. I want us to continue thinking of the wider and the bigger world that will come after this. We need to obviously follow things like the Centre of Disease recommendations, the World Health Organization, the UN, United Nations. We need to think about our own social distancing. Our social media, we perhaps need to not get involved in some of the message groups that get sensational or sort of repeat sort of false narratives around the place. Finding fun things at home. There's loads of wonderful. I sent a fitness monopoly out in the bulletin on Friday. There's wonderful things to use. And practice kindness, guys, and practice grace. And I'm saying this in the context of our families, of our parents, of our siblings, of our grandparents. Think about those around us. This crisis is bringing out so much good in people, which is nice to say when it sometimes feels that none of us have faced this before. And I want to just finish on this before I go into my assembly. The pandemic experience is a massive experiment in collective vulnerability. We can be our worst selves when we're afraid, or at our very best, we can be our bravest selves. In the context of fear and vulnerability, there's often very little in between, because when we are uncertain and afraid, our default is self-protection. We don't have to be scary when we're scared, so let's choose awkward, brave, and kind. And as a school community, what I've been privileged to see over these last couple of weeks is that we choose each other and we're working together. So, what do I mean by home? Well, I've done this assembly a few times, and let me just give you a quote from Sarah Dessen. Home wasn't a set house or a single town on a map. It was wherever the people who loved you were, whenever you were together, not a place but a moment. And then another building on each other like bricks to create a solid shelter that you take with you for your entire life, wherever you may go. Now, if you think of that concept, home isn't a house or a town necessarily or a map. It's about the people, it's about the moments, it's about the love, and it's not these places, it's not necessarily solid, but it's something we carry inside us as we go forward. Okay, it's a shame I can't interact on this one, but I can feel right now people shouting out, and I can see Jacob's arm straight up, and I can see Malta, and I can see various others there, Arthur, Mihai, Georgia, shouting out now. So, 4 famous homes around the world, okay? give you a moment to think about where they are. And they're famous homes because they are the residences of either heads of state, heads of government. Of course, we have Buckingham Palace, the home of the Queen of the United Kingdom. We have the White House, of course, home of the President of the United States. We have, lots of people love the fact that Downing Street looks so tiny for the home of the British Prime Minister, but there's 10 Downing Street. And of course, we have the Kremlin, huge palace, fortress palace in Moscow. As you can hear, this is live and I've got classes calling me right now, so bear with me for a second. Or I just say decline. There we go. Well, there you go. At least you know that I'm doing this in live time. Okay, I'm going to introduce a nice Welsh word for us this morning. Does dim gair yn Saesneg am hiraeth. Hiraeth, there's no word in English at all for hiraeth. Hiraeth is one of the wonderful Welsh words that I really, really love to hear. I suppose it's the idea of longing or yearning. You want your home. Hiraeth is a sense of being so much part of a place, and the place is a part of you. You feel forever incomplete when separated from it. Finding one's true spiritual home, if you ever do, you know the meaning of hiraeth. It describes that home feels like wherever. Hiraeth can also mean a longing for many things, not just a homeland. I think it can even be used to mean nostalgia for times past as opposed to place. I'm sure Jacob will help me out here in Malta, and Leah and Nella, but I know that in German, Heimat comes pretty close to the Welsh concept of hiraeth. But it's a really powerful idea of where we're connected to. So I want to show you some images now about homes around the world, and I'm really lucky to have worked in many places around the world and seen different places and how people lived in these different homes. So just take a look at these as we look through these images now of homes around the world. Faulkner said, "How often have I lain beneath rain on a strange roof, thinking of home." Look at the contrast between what a wealthy person, I think that one's in Florida with the swimming pool, compared to, I think those are some of the slums in Delhi. Laura Ingalls Wilder, home is the nicest word there is. And although those homes are really contrasting, the children look as if they're very happy where their home is. Well, sometimes home is a person. If I go back to Mid Wales to see family, and I see my 87-year-old uncle, and him sitting outside his home, I suppose I associate the two quite closely. A man travels the world over in search of what he needs and returns home to find it. There are many writers and many philosophers who talk about the idea that you have to go and find your home. You need to leave your home to come back to it. The famous poet from my county of Shropshire, a Shropshire lad, A.E. Housman, he wrote about the idea of blue remembered hills and lanes that you can't go back again. So actually, once you leave your home, you can't ever get back to it and find it as you remembered it. I used to dream about escaping my ordinary life. My life was never ordinary. I simply failed to notice how extraordinary it was. Likewise, I never imagined that home might be something I might miss. When we're children or we go into our first steps of adulthood, perhaps going to university, we're longing to make our own steps in the world, and our homes we sort of leave behind us at that point. I love these two pictures here, certainly the one on the mountainside. What is home? My favourite definition is a safe place, a place where one is free from attack, a place where one experiences secures relationships and affirmation. It is a place where people share and understand each other. Its relationships are nurturing. The people in it do not need to be perfect. Instead, they need to be honest, loving, supportive, recognizing a common humanity that makes all of us vulnerable. And that house on the mountainside there, I think that's Afghanistan or Pakistan. It's astonishing the way that's somebody's home. Maya Angelou. The ache for home lives in all of us. The safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. So you've got a wonderful, I think that's Fiji, and then you've got this incredible sort of igloo of ice, just as a contrast. You can go other places, all right. You can live on the other side of the world, but you can't ever leave your home. When I first started working in Siberia, and I was in Tomsk, and you can see it as I look out my window here on Dacha Boulevard. They call the Khrushchevskaya, the tower blocks that were all across the old Soviet Union for people to live in. And then what I loved about Tomsk, which again is everywhere, is the concept. You can see the family there in their dacha, and that's the weekend place to get out of the city in the tower block. I thought it was a wonderful idea. Home is where my habits have habitat. Now this is a great one for social distancing right now as we're talking about this. I don't care if we have our house or a cliff ledge or a cardboard box. Home is wherever we all are together. Look, I think that's a favela in Rio. Look at that crowdiness, and I think that's, I want to say that's the Midwest in America, I think, when I chose that picture, to contrast the two sort of spaces of home right now. We're still in the middle of crises around the world. COVID-19 hasn't changed. I spoke to somebody this morning actually and said, do we remember the Australian fires a few weeks ago, or the flooding that we've had this winter, or the Syrian refugee crisis is still there with that awful civil war in that sort of country, and losing your home, how people have coped, the psychological effect of children, millions of them that go into school for years, and you think of what we're trying to do, find solutions now for what we think is a couple of months, and we have the comfort and luxury of a sort of relatively stable civil society across Europe. The heartland lies where the heart longs to be. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to find the true place to plant it. I think what we're finding more and more with climate change, the Greta Thunberg sort of movement, and for you as young people, that although it seems sometimes we live in an age of more and more narrowing sort of national sort of identity as opposed to being a global citizen, I think this current crisis, as it spread across the world, we've watched the different responses from governments to how they deal with this, whether they see this as a world crisis that they can work together on, or they feel it's something that their sort of arrogance and hubris will solve just by saying, go to the parks, or I'll get the numbers down from 15 to 0. But you look at one world, and this is our planet, and I always think about those astronauts must have thought on their first Apollo missions, Apollo 11 and 12, and what they thought when they looked down on the Soyuz and they saw the Earth. What was in the mind of Gagarin and Armstrong when they looked at our one planet in this sort of huge universe? Okay, I do miss you guys. We are open. You're on the DLP. You're doing great work. I don't know when we are back together again, but I am looking forward to celebrating all together as a community. But in the meantime, do yourselves proud, do your families proud, do your community proud, our country as well, and our sort of wider global societies. Learn and get your education and do what you're doing, and take care of one another. Look out for each other. I am really proud of you all, and I can't wait when we can get back to our new normal. But as for now, we're not. So I have my tea, I have my sanity. I'm still the lighthouse keeper, I feel, keeping the light going here up on the top of Dacha Boulevard for Heritage International School. But look after one another and take care. Okay, diolch yn fawr.